can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Put the palms down. So once every few months I tell this story because it pops into my head for some reason. This was, I don't know, probably 6 years ago or something like that. And we're getting ready on a Saturday morning, and we had just done, as we do often, when we tend to move, we tend to outgrow spaces. And we had just set up a new shrine room at the back of the old Buddha for You spot. And so we had adjusted the shrine, and everything was different from the normal routine, distance and setup and everything like that. And so I went to start that first class, and I did my offerings, and I went down, and as I was coming up, I just smacked my head on the shrine. And it was really funny, because it was that moment where, you know, for me, like, there's formal ritual practice that personally is important to me. It's maybe not important to many people. Many people don't do it, and that, you know, that's fine. But for me, it was important. And, you know, there's a lot going on at that moment where your mind and your heart, your intention is in this kind of formal offering. And all of a sudden, you just smack your head on the table, you know. And I just started to laugh, because what else was I going to do, you know. And it reminded me of when I was a kid, and I was like 5 years old in kindergarten. And I'll never forget sitting there, and the teacher was reading a story, you know, story time. And all of a sudden I felt sick. So I'm sitting there, you know, and I got my hand up, and I got my hand up, and I got my hand up, and I'm waiting, I'm trying to get the attention of the teacher. And I never got the attention of the teacher, and I had to throw up. So I just sat there and I threw up. And I don't know what the teacher was doing, actually, now that I think about it, because all the kids like scattered, and the teacher's just sitting there still reading. But, you know, every time I tell the first story about hitting my head, it reminds me of the second story about being 5 years old and just sitting there and doing that. And I think for me, part of this practice is just learning to be comfortable with things as they are in whatever they are. And that's something that's often so difficult for us, right? We get into meditation or Buddhist practice because of some sort of discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction, wanting things to be different, better, changed, fixed, corrected. And a lot of this practice is learning about to just be with what is. At that moment, I hit my head on the table, and I can either be really angry or mad or embarrassed or have my ego hurt or my pride or worry about what other people are going to think, or I could just laugh at what an idiot I am for hitting my head on the table, right? At 5 years old, I'm sure there wasn't that much intellectual processing going on other than, I guess I just got to sit with this. And, you know, 38 years later, it's still kind of the same thing. I guess I got to sit with this. And I really believe that the sooner we learn to just sit with things as they are, the sooner we'll be able to go through our days and find a little more peace and happiness, which is what everybody's looking for the most part. So just be with the mess, you know. Not everything has to be fixed. So, all right. Thanks all for showing up, braving the rainstorms we have here in San Diego. Everybody's bundled up. We'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things I'll tell you for those who are maybe sitting for the first time. Nothing's going to happen to you, most likely. There are chairs and there are cushions up here if you want. Don't feel like you have to go all the way to the back. If you're closer, you're more likely to stay awake and not fall asleep too. So. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You won't have any magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working? Is this not working? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds, right? People cough, phones ring, people come in the door. This is life. Life is filled with chaos and sounds around us. The practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are in the cushions, it often helps sliding to the front third, pushing the stomach forward. Allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you're on the chairs, also just trying to sit up straight. Shoulders are relaxed, hands on the knees or in the lap. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, just means your leg hurts. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, don't expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, we'll settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought, returning attention, focus to the breath. letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing, and with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sound, and the mind learning to settle know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, just as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the Buddha statue or incense or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than anyone in this room who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for every one of us in this room, regardless of where you come from, what you believe in, where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get. The practice of meditation is simply sitting, breathing, becoming aware of how you feel now, and looking at how you typically feel throughout your day. And working on closing that gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun, but it's free. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and every other person you encounter every moment of your life. That's why it's so simple. You just have to be nice to people, starting with yourself. Meditation's not an escape, as often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, stressed out, hectic mess, meditation doesn't fix that. It just makes you become aware of it. So you can then work on figuring out, how do I make changes in my life so my life isn't a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess? Now, I'm sure that's not the case for any of you in this room. You just had nothing better to do on a Saturday morning than show up here. Early on, this practice can be challenging because it kind of forces us, if you learn to sit quietly, with the one thing that causes all the suffering in your life. And no, that's not the person you spend all your time with. That's yourself. All right? Somebody said to me, we have our, many of you know, but the Dharma Bum Life program going on right now. So it's a 10-week program, and a group of 27 people together for 10 weeks. And this is week 3, and we have their first retreat, which is the Day of Silence. So they joined the rest of the crew for Day of Silence today. So this morning there's probably 50-something people in here from 8 to about 10:30. The whole crew you saw silently cleaning the temple, that was all of them when you came in. And so last night, or Thursday night I should say, it was a great discussion, some pretty heavy topics. And you know, when you sit in a smaller group and you get into looking at the nature of your own mind and the cause of your own suffering, it can get pretty emotional. So somebody said to me that coming into the retreat this morning, they were not looking forward to sitting with everything that they just encountered Thursday night. You know, we tend to run from things. We tend to not want to look at like really what's going on in our mind and our hearts, and we want to just escape to something to make it better. And when you become aware of the suffering that you're sitting with, and it becomes very real, and you look at it very honestly, and then you have to sit silently a day and a half later for 4 hours in the same place that you just realized all of that, that can be rough. But that's the practice, is learning to be with what's going on. And not spending forever, as I alluded to earlier, trying to fix it. Because most of the pain and suffering and struggles that we experience on a day-to-day basis have to do with our mind trying to figure out something that happened a long time ago that we wish didn't happen. Anyone ever been able to change anything that happened in the past? I mean, if you got the trick to that, let me know. All right? So when we sit and we ponder and we don't feel good and we're thinking about all the stuff from the past, it doesn't do us any good. And once in a while, yeah, look at it, understand it, see where pain is coming from, learn to come to terms with it, come to peace with it, be with it. But don't spend the next 17 years trying to figure it all out because you'll miss the next 17 years. And then 17 years from there, you'll be looking back at the last 17 years that you missed because you were focused on trying to figure out the first 17 years. I don't know if that made any sense, but in my head it did. So I'm going to stop there. I'll just open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with that I can address. We'll go from there. Yes?
How do you meditate when you're angry? Because for me, anger is not a quiet feeling.
Anger is not a what?
You know, I have a hard time even imagining myself being quiet when I'm feeling angry. And this week, there was a moment where I wanted to yell at someone for whom yelling at them was not an option. And I wasn't sure what to do because I went home feeling that feeling and yeah,
So the question of how do you meditate when you're angry, it's the exact same way you meditate when you're happy. Often, and not necessarily you, but just in general, we think that meditation means that we have to be these happy, peaceful people. And in this happy, peaceful place. If you're angry and you meditate, yes, you're an angry meditator. But you know what you're not doing at that moment in time? Yelling, screaming, kicking, fighting, punching, doing the things that you probably want to do while you're angry. Meditation is not blocking out emotions. If you're angry and you sit for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, chances are you're still going to feel that anger. But you're allowed to be with it. Again, for you or anybody, don't think, especially for people who are new, that if you're angry and all of a sudden you sit down and meditate, that means that anger is going to go away. It's not. All right? So the practice of meditation, as I alluded to earlier, is not an escape and it's not checking out. It's being with what is present. Breathing in, I feel anger. Breathing out, oh, I still feel anger. Breathing in, I feel compassion. Nope, I still feel anger. Breathing out, yep, still anger. And we be with it. The beauty of the emotions when they arise, and often we think that almost as if we're trying to live in this pieced out, blissful state. Good luck with that, right? You're human, that means you're going to have a huge range of emotions. But the most beautiful thing about, to me, one of the essence of Buddhist teachings of the impermanence of all phenomena, you ever been in a good mood too? Been happy before? Does that last forever? No. So impermanence is a beautiful thing when it comes to anger, because that anger also won't last. But what I can suggest is when you feel that anger, don't think you can't meditate. Just pull away, strip away any expectations you might have of what you think you're supposed to accomplish from the meditation. And that's usually what stops most people from doing a meditation, is they're tied to some story of what they think it's supposed to be like. Meditation is not like everything you read, and it's not like everything people present. In fact, nobody can even tell you what meditation is like. They have no idea what your meditation practice is like. Right? Did anyone in this room do nothing but focus on sensation of breath for the last 20 minutes? No. I mean, maybe we got it for 20 seconds. And after that, you spent, 19 minutes and 40 seconds wandering and waiting for me to hit the bell. Or some variation of that. Right? So the mind is always going to range from emotion to emotion to emotion. Recognize it. Be with it. That's important. Does that help at all? Yeah. Yes?
When you say deal with it, for example, you have anxiety or something that was except for that, it's not permanent. How do you deal with it?
How do you deal with what? Well, I said be with it. You said deal with it. I think those are two different things. The way I hear the phrase, I'll start there, right? So your question, I think, is I said how to be with it, but then...
Okay, I thought deal.
Yeah.
Because ultimately you're going to deal with it.
Yes. But, yeah, go ahead, sorry.
So I understand you be with it, but what happens then?
I don't know. What does happen then? Right? So I want to come back to the first part, because I think, again, the way I see it's just my perception of those two words. When I hear the phrase deal with it, that means it's going to be something that I don't like.
Right.
Correct? That's what deal with it means. Deal with it. When I hear be with it, deal with it to me sounds very closed, very angry, very filled with hatred or discomfort. Be with it comes from a place of opening the heart and having love and compassion towards what it is and softening around what's going on. Those two words, the change in those words to me changes everything. And if I take the approach of being with the emotion, then I can't answer what's next. But if I be with it, as opposed to resist it, what happens next is going to be very different. If I resist it and I have to deal with it and I dislike it, then I'm going to be cultivating feelings of dislike and anger and hatred. But I'm going to pass it off as my meditation, and then I'm going to get up and I'm going to go do things with the same dislike of that emotion. If I be with it, maybe the emotion settles. Maybe it's not as strong. And then whatever I'm left with is what I go do. The real question is, what do you do with it? My question is, that's not a question for me to answer. That's a question for you to answer. Does that make sense?
Think about it.
Yes, think about it. You know, my master used to say, don't look for any answers, just change the way we ask questions. And I think if you start with that approach of being with the emotion versus dealing with the emotion, you might have a different outcome. But only you will know. Very, yes, I think a very big distinction between the two. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I think for me, just being with it helps me realize that I may not be able to fix it, which is the what do you do? Okay, what do I do now?
Right.
I'm being with it, but what's the next step?
Yes.
And just recognizing that I'm being with it, it's here.
Mm-hmm.
I may not be able to fix it, but in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
here I am.
Yeah, absolutely, because a lot of this ties into when we're with something that is, you know, it's, and this is what the Buddha called dukkha, suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction, unpleasant, right? We want to fix it. And a lot of this has to do with trying to potentially, I know nobody here ever does this, but letting go of trying to control outcomes. Right? So when we stop ourselves from trying to control the outcome, I think that also by default allows us to be with something a little bit more, even if we dislike it, as you said. Yeah. Yes.
I think it works for me a few times or many times. If anything bad things happen, not to think about it too much or don't take it too serious.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel that let the nature take its course and it'll be okay
Right.
after a short while, a few days or
Yes.
2 hours.
Yes.
And just not to think about it or what the outcome, we just don't think about it. But I realize some people just cannot do it.
Yeah, it's we tend to tell stories and hold on to stories in our lives for a long time, right? And if something bad happens this morning, we can fixate on it for 5 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, 10 years, right? Or we can just kind of observe it and move on from it. And I think that's why the meditation practice is so important, because what the meditation practice is helping us do is training the mind to be in the present moment. And anything that's happened in the past that we dislike has happened in the past. And if we stay in this present moment, what we are living in this moment is the karma, the causes and conditions of everything that has happened in the past. So we are living with every past experience, but we don't have to spin it into a lifelong story that creates a lot of suffering. And when we want to look at things, we can look at them, explore them, learn from them. You know, if we put our hand on a hot stove, it's good to have the memory of don't put your hand on a hot stove. So we have to sometimes use things that we've learned from the past to help us in the present moment. Yeah, that's a good skill if you're able to do it. Congratulations. Yeah. Yes, in the back.
There's times when I'll be sitting and the past memories just get so strong that I get physical pain, like in my stomach and my chest. So I do take a lot of time just like avoiding thinking. So I'll go work out or something, because just sitting and thinking about it, there's just a lot of
So you're saying that the sitting and thinking about emotional pain causes physical pain?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. I have a wonderful friend who's a wonderful doctor, and what she talks about constantly is the physical pain that manifests from the emotional, mental pain that we carry. And having healthy outlets, like you said, to kind of work out, exercise, to take your mind away from it. I think it's important that we all, to some extent, develop healthy coping skills, because, you know, I don't like to pretend that just because you meditate or read one Buddhist book that all of a sudden, you know, you're going to be this fully present, enlightened being and never have difficulties. It doesn't work that way. So finding a healthy thing to turn to when you have that physical pain, that's a wonderful practice. And then also balancing that with seeing how long we can sit with the mental emotional pain without having to run from it, you know? Yeah. Yes?
My question's kind of similar to that. Something that's kind of upset me, like I can feel where the tension is lying
Yes.
in my back. So as I'm meditating, I'm just kind of trying to feel out my body and try to understand that tension and try to breathe to kind of release it. Do you have any advice or process to help ease that tension out?
No.
Your process?
No. Continue to train your mind. The physical pain that you're talking about, the stress, the anxiety, it's in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
You ever had to pee really bad? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking for the bathroom and you can't find it, and you finally get there, and then you think you're about to go pee, and all of a sudden the door's locked and somebody's in there, right? And the closer you get to actually going pee, it gets worse, right? The more you focus on it, the worse it gets. What I heard you say was that you're experiencing pain and you're focusing on it, and you're trying to use the mind that is causing the pain to fix the pain. I would try to settle the mind. It is the mental stress and chaos in your head and the way you're living your life. It all comes down to the way we live our lives, and we don't want to look at that. We want to live our lives in unhealthy ways, think a bunch of things we shouldn't probably be thinking, say a bunch of things we shouldn't probably be saying, do a bunch of things we shouldn't probably be doing, watch a bunch of stuff we probably shouldn't be watching, have conversations we probably shouldn't be having. We want to live in all of these ways in very potentially unhealthy manners. And then we want to explore meditation and think that's going to fix us. This practice is about changing your life. It is not about becoming a better meditator. It's not about reading another Buddhist book. It's not about what's the trick to fix what you're talking about. It's about very honestly looking at the way you live your life. What do? You don't have to answer this, but what do you do from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep? And if your livelihood, if your actions, if your effort are coming from a place of loving kindness and compassion and generosity and morality and patience, then you won't feel this way. The Buddha called these precepts. And we just explored these in depth on Thursday night. 5 basic precepts the Buddha taught to lay people and monks and nuns. All right? Refrain from lying. Refrain from killing. Refrain from stealing. Refrain from sexual misconduct. And refrain from intoxicants, things that alter states of mind. These are 5 simple things that if we put these 5 things into our lives, we will suffer less. If you don't believe it, try it. But please don't just keep meditating and think that meditation is the solution. To me, meditation is like Advil when we have a headache. You pop 2 Advil, the headache goes away. Next day you wake up, there's another headache. I need my Advil. You spend your whole life popping Advil to get rid of the headache. Look at why you're getting the headache to begin with. The headache is what we call our life. And we have to look at how are we living our life that's causing what you just described, this physical pain. Because you're not the only one. right? So I look at the root of the suffering and understanding the cause of the suffering, not just looking at how do I get rid of it from the same mind that's causing it. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's not easy to do, is it?
No,
No.
but I've been studying like the 8 Noble Paths, so I think I'll focus a lot on that.
Focus your whole life on that.
Yep.
The Eightfold Path I mean, it's just 8 steps. The Buddha said, just do these 8 things and you'll stop suffering. You know? Have the correct views and thoughts and speech and action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration. 8 steps. That's it. 8 things.
It's interesting because they all seem like 8 simple things, but as you get into more, then you start to realize that there's a lot to it.
They do seem like simple things, and as you get into them more, there is a lot to it. And you know why there's a lot to it? Because most of us are miserable at doing them. Right? That's why.
Right.
So, yes, on the surface, yeah, I can have good thoughts. How long does that last? I can say good words. How long does that last? You know? So, yeah. But you're on the right, no pun intended, path. Yeah, there was a hand, I think, somewhere here. Yeah. Oh.
I found for me that after all the realization and this and that, my problems arise when I just dwell in something that's going to happen. I assume the worst, and I live in that fear,
Yes.
just hoping it'll go away. I tried meditating it away, whatever I could do, read a book, an inspirational book. And then I found the real thing for me was to take an action. You know, if you're 2/3 go to the dentist.
Right.
And if I don't like the dentist, sometimes at a certain point you have to go.
Right.
And it's worked for me, a number of times in my life where just one very physical, real world action
Yes.
solved my problems. It
Yes.
wasn't esoteric or anything. And I'm learning that more and more.
Yeah, and that's it. You know, and it's funny because, I love you being here and I love your questions over the last couple of years. And what was going off in my head as you were speaking, I was like, yes, after 2 years, he finally gets it. Right? Like we have to take that action because we do. When we look at our lives and we look at Buddhist teachings in an intellectual manner, we can spin ourselves around day in and day out. Like you said, another meditation, another book, looking for what is that answer. Who here has seen Kung Fu Panda? We showed it last night. It was our big feature for Dharma Bum Theater here, Kung Fu Panda, right? You remember what's on the secret dragon scroll? Nothing. Yeah.
Was it the first Kung Fu Panda?
Yeah, the first one. It got a little late. We didn't do a double feature. Yeah. Anything else? Thoughts, questions? Yes?
What's the tradition of this temple?
What's the what?
Sub-tradition for this temple?
We're just a Buddhist temple. Yeah, no sub-traditions. We started the Dharma Bum Temple 12 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to local folks. So I usually say this at the end, but I'll just touch on it now because it's your question. We don't have a master. We don't have nuns or monks or lamas. We are just a bunch of unenlightened folks leading a bunch of, no offense, other unenlightened folks. And what we saw when we started the Dharma Bum Temple, those of us from the beginning came from a very cultural Buddhist background. Myself specifically a Taiwanese Chan and Pure Land temple and monastery life in Taiwan, and the temple here in San Diego, and I saw for about 3 years a revolving door of all these Western folks show up wanting to learn Buddhism, but having a hard time staying because of cultural barriers, language, bowing, chanting, robes, a lot of the things that we felt made it difficult for the average Western person to feel comfortable in. So we wanted a way where we could introduce Buddhism beyond the cultural barriers and touch on all the different schools of Buddhism. So we have a Zen practice, we have a Theravada practice, we have Tibetan practices, we introduce all the major schools. And then we bring in, monks and nuns and lamas and, people that I always say know what they're talking about. When often people ask me what kind of Buddhism do you practice, I say the good kind. Does that answer your question? Yeah, absolutely. And for those who don't know, most temples you go to, and I encourage you to, we're so spoiled here in San Diego. I mean, literally within 5-10 miles, we have probably 30 Buddhist temples, cultural temples, what I call cultural temples. And go to them. right? The first Buddhist temple in San Diego, downtown at 2929 Market Street. It's a Japanese Buddhist temple, Buddhist Temple San Diego. Go there. Go to Shifeng Temple, which is like a mile from here, right? Go to the Zen Center Pacific Beach. See how these places practice. It's important because there is a 2,500 years history and tradition of Buddhism. It's not just a bunch of folks sitting around talking and asking questions and meditating all day. Like, there are people who live this path and live this practice. Go to Metaforest Monastery in Escondido, and you'll find the Thai forest tradition. You'll see about 10, 12, 15 monks who live as close to the life of the Buddha as anybody you'll find. You know, wearing robes and having about a handful of items and begging for food every morning, and that's it. That's what they do. But we have all our stuff and all of our conveniences and all of our houses and cars and jobs and monies and or lack of all that stuff, and then we enter Buddhism and we want Buddhism to like fix us. You know? Look at all the stuff we have. Change the way we live. That makes change. And that's why I think, you know, when you go to what I call cultural temples and you see the way monks and nuns and, you know, the lifestyle and how simple they live and how hard they practice, how disciplined they are, it's really beautiful. So, does that answer your question? Yeah, yeah. Anything else before we close? All right. So we will join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Maddie during her time of suffering. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So a few announcements before you all head out. Thank you for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. This is where I would normally ramble on, which was my answer to your question. So 12 years ago we started downtown initially. We've been in this location 2 years. And here we are. Every night we have different practices going on. As I mentioned, different people leading from different traditions. For the next basically 7 weeks, our Monday night Zen group and our Thursday night Basics group is on hold because we're using the space for the Dharma Bum Life program. So that'll be on hold for 7 weeks, and then once this is done, we'll return to the original schedule. First Saturday of every month, as I mentioned earlier, is today. So you have 4 weeks to work up to it. It's 4 hours of silence. If 20 minutes of silence is absolute torture for you, then I strongly suggest doing it for 4 hours. It's a great way to sit everything, to be with it. You can go back and forth between dealing with it and being with it for 4 hours. It'll be phenomenal. Yeah, so that's the first Saturday of every month. It's just as free as everything else we do here. As I mentioned earlier, we're now doing movie nights every Friday night. Anything out of the ordinary. Food redistribution continues as usual. Every Thursday we prepare gourmet vegetarian meals and we feed a few hundred people who live on the streets downtown. So anytime you think your life sucks and you lack gratitude and don't appreciate, you know, how fortunate we are to have what we have, feed people who sleep on a sidewalk every night, and it tends to put things into perspective. Tomorrow, Chuck, you didn't even remind me. Were you going to remind me? You were going to. Thank you. Tomorrow, Damien is here for the singing bowl meditation. He comes once a month also. It's 2 o'clock first Sunday of every month, and it's basically like this, but instead of somebody sitting up here yapping at you, he brings about 10 Tibetan bowls, and it's just silent for 45 minutes, so it's a really beautiful practice. Yes?
Since you changed recently the food distribution peanut butter and jelly to food?
No peanut butter and jelly at all, at all.
And so now, how are you open to receiving alternative food?
We are, so there's a whole group working on that,
Right?
and they are meeting again today at 12:30. We have 3 committee chairs, Courtney, Allie, and Andrea. Raise your hand, yay. Are coordinating that effort, but we are returning to what it initially was, which was not a distribution, but a redistribution. So we are preparing sandwiches only from food that would have been wasted or thrown away. So we're not buying food. We don't want people going to the stores and buying food. We only are getting food from places that would waste it or throw it away, and they are currently figuring all of that out. So I don't have any specific answers for you yet, but for those who are curious, you can talk to Andrea or Courtney or Allie and anyone else that'll be here at the meeting at 12:30. But the last 3 weeks we've done nothing pretty much but make veggie sandwiches from tomatoes and cucumber and spinach, and it's been really beautiful. Yeah. So it's been a nice, smooth transition. Yes, no more peanut butter and jelly at all. Yeah. Anything else before we send you out to the rains? Drive safe. If I never see you again, think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. That's the essence of this practice. So good luck.